Right now, out in the ocean, the USS Abraham Lincoln has been deployed for well over 260 days.
Yeah, which is just an incredibly long time.
It's actually the longest modern naval deployment in history.
Right.
And while the sailors inside that hull are dealing with, you know, collapsing plumbing, depleted food supplies, and even a documented investigation into a mental health-related man overboard.
Which is awful.
It is. The President of the United States was recently asked if the ship had been out there too long. And his response, no, not nearly long enough.
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really tense situation playing out right now between the military and the executive branch.
It's definitely a heated one.
Exactly. Our source material today is basically a distress flare in the form of an article. It's an opinion piece from August 14, 2026. It's titled Not Nearly Long Enough, and it's by a veteran named Eric Reinhardt.
And, I mean, it is just a blistering piece of writing.
Oh, absolutely.
The author takes this massive amount of raw, real-time data from this current deployment and aims it directly at the commander-in-chief. And our task today is really to deconstruct how he builds that argument.
Right. But before we get into the actual mechanics of that argument, I really need to lay down a very important disclaimer for you.
Yeah, this is crucial.
Because this source material contains highly charged political content. And, I mean, it is heavily critical of Donald Trump and his administration. But our goal today is not to take a political side.
Exactly. We aren't endorsing the author's views here.
Right. Nor are we taking a stance on the administration's policies. Our mission is strictly analytical. We're just going to map out the arguments, the allegations, and the actual military realities the author presents so you can understand the anatomy of a controversy that is just dominating the defense space right now.
Completely dominating it.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. The inciting incident for the article is that specific press exchange we mentioned. A reporter asks Donald Trump about the sheer length of the USS Abraham Lincoln's deployment. The 260 days.
Which, again, is record-breaking.
Right. And Trump responds with those 5 words. No, not nearly long enough.
What's fascinating here is how Reinhardt captures the immediate ripple effect of that phrasing.
Right.
The author zeroes in on those words because, I mean, in military culture, deployment length isn't just some number on a calendar. It dictates operational tempo, or op tempo, as they call it.
Which is a huge deal.
It's massive. The military operates on a very strict cycle, right? You have deployment, maintenance, and training, and when you push a carrier strike group past that 200-day mark, you're fundamentally altering that op tempo.
You're pushing everything to the limit.
Exactly. You're forcing both the machinery and, the human beings into an endurance phase they aren't sustainably built for. So when the president says it's not long enough, he's taking this serious mathematical logistical strain and treating it as like a casual metric of toughness.
Yeah, and the reporter didn't just let it drop there, though. The follow-up question immediately pivots to the families. I mean, there are 5,000 service members on that ship.
Right, a whole small town.
Exactly. So the reporter asks if the president is aware that military families are actively raising concerns about the deteriorating conditions on the carrier. And Trump issues this flat, unequivocal denial. He just says, no, they're not.
Yeah.
He doesn't offer that standard political deflection, the usual, I'll have my team look into it, or we're monitoring the situation.
Right, the usual PR answers.
Right. He just denies the existence of the family's concerns entirely, right before confirming that the ship is, in fact, finally being swapped out.
And that rhetorical choice, that denial, is really the foundation of Reinhardt's entire critique here.
How so?
Well, you have a factual, record-breaking deployment, right? You have documented friction from the families, and then you have a political dismissal of that friction.
I see.
Reinhardt uses this exchange to highlight what he sees as this profound institutional blind spot. The denial isn't just like a misstatement of fact. To the author, it represents the complete erasure of the lived experience of those 5,000 sailors and their dependents back home.
Wow. And I want to dig into that lived experience because the conditions Reinhardt outlines in the piece are just staggering.
They really are.
We need to talk about what is actually happening below deck because we are looking at severe systemic breakdowns in the ship's infrastructure.
Yeah.
We're talking food shortages, moldy showers, contaminated water, like basic hygiene supplies completely depleted.
And to understand how a premier nuclear-powered aircraft carrier reaches that state, you really have to look at the logistics of a 260-day continuous posture.
Right, because it's not normal.
Not at all.
Yeah.
A Nimitz-class carrier is essentially a floating industrial city. And its systems are designed for very specific maintenance intervals. Take the plumbing, for example.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, the vacuum collection, holding, and transfer system, the VCHT, relies on this delicate balance of chemical treatments and mechanical pumps. It handles the biological waste of 5,000 people.
That's a lot of strain on a system.
Exactly. So when you keep a ship at sea this long without a proper port call, you completely miss those required maintenance windows. The biological breakdown overloads the system, the physical parts fail, and because you aren't pulling into port, you can't get the specialized replacement parts easily.
It's the equivalent of running a high-performance engine tens of thousands of miles past its oil change interval.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
You aren't just wearing down the brake pads,
Yeah.
The permanent friction inside the engine block is actively destroying the core machinery.
Yeah.
You're compromising the vehicle's ability to ever run at peak performance again.
Spot on. And the supply chain issues just compound this entirely. The author points out that mail is so backed up that care packages are lost for months.
Months.
Yes, because when a carrier strike group is operating in a high-threat environment, they aren't just casually pulling into friendly ports. The carrier onboard delivery flights, the COD flights, they have to prioritize critical mission parts and ordnance over, fresh vegetables or mail.
Which makes sense tactically, but
Right, but the human result is a crew drinking bad water and being entirely cut off from their families.
and the psychological toll of that kind of isolation has got to be immense. I mean, military personnel are highly resilient, but resilience relies on a functioning support structure.
Absolutely.
When the physical environment becomes hazardous and the connection to home is severed, you see an immediate degradation in combat effectiveness. And Reinhardt points to a very tragic, specific incident to illustrate this.
Yeah, this part was tough to read.
On August 3rd, a sailor went overboard. Now, the individual was recovered, they were treated and evacuated, but the incident is being officially investigated as a mental health episode.
Right.
And the families are publicly stating this is not just an isolated close call.
No, and the documentation on this is already moving up the chain of command. I mean, Senator Richard Blumenthal actually drafted a letter to the Pentagon outlining these exact crises. Yeah, it lays out the plumbing failures, the deck safety concerns, and the severe mental health deterioration. So this isn't just, an angry veteran posting online. It is an official congressional inquiry based on corroborated reports from the fleet.
Which makes what happens next even more frustrating.
Oh.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is asked about these reports during a trip to Central America, he casually dismisses them.
Just brushes it off.
Yeah. He tells reporters the claims about the ship are completely misrepresented. No specifics, no corrections, just a blanket dismissal. It's like living in an isolated, floating city where the infrastructure is literally collapsing.
Right.
But the city manager, who happens to be vacationing on a beach in another country, insists everything is perfectly fine.
That is exactly how it feels. And Hegseth's reaction serves as the second pillar of Reinhardt's argument regarding leadership. Because in military strategy, readiness is a holistic metric. It requires functional aircraft, yes, but it also requires a crew that is physically healthy and mentally sharp enough to launch and recover those aircraft on a pitching deck at night.
Which is incredibly dangerous even under perfect conditions.
Exactly. So by waving away these cascading infrastructure failures as just misrepresented, the Secretary of Defense is communicating to the fleet that the Pentagon does not consider their physical reality to be a strategic priority. Reinhardt argues this represents a dangerous, widening disconnect between the top civilian leadership and the operational truth on the water.
Right. Now, I have to say, I struggled a bit with the jump Reinhardt makes next in the piece.
The history lesson.
Yeah, we're analyzing catastrophic plumbing failures, mental health crises, and Pentagon press strategy, and suddenly the author pivots to a history lesson on the 1960s.
What?
He brings up Donald Trump's 5 draft deferments during the Vietnam War, 4 for school, and the 5th being the famous bone spurs diagnosis. And on a first read, I was like, wait, this feels like a total non sequitur.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does bringing up decades-old draft deferments distract from the immediate, tangible crisis of the Abraham Lincoln? Or is he trying to establish a pattern?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Reinhardt is using that history not as a distraction at all, but as the underlying thesis of his argument.
Okay, unpack that for me.
He's building a case about the contrast of sacrifice and the moral authority to command. The author gets deeply specific with the historical details here to undermine the legitimacy of that deformment.
Right.
He cites a New York Times report where the daughters of the podiatrist who made the bone spur diagnosis claimed it was done strictly as a favor to Fred Trump.
The president's father.
Exactly, who owned the Queens building where the podiatrist practiced. And Reinhardt also emphasizes that no contemporaneous medical record has ever surfaced to actually validate the tradition.
Wow. And then he layers that Vietnam history with much more recent controversies. The piece cites reporting from The Atlantic regarding Trump's behavior during his previous term. Specifically, these allegations that Trump referred to Americans buried at the Ain Marne Cemetery as losers and Marines killed at Belleau Wood as suckers.
Yeah, which are heavy claims.
Extremely. Now, Trump has vehemently denied saying this, but Reinhardt makes a point to emphasize the corroboration. The author notes that Trump's former chief of staff, Marine General John Kelly, went on the record by name to confirm those comments.
Right.
And General Kelly lost his own son in Afghanistan. I mean, for a four-star Marine general to publicly corroborate that kind of rhetoric carries massive weight in military circles.
It does. And Reinhardt weaves these elements together to explain why the president would say a 260-day deployment is not nearly long enough.
So it all ties back to the quote.
Exactly. The argument is that a leader who actively avoided military service, who, never stood a watch, in the author's words, and who allegedly holds fallen soldiers in contempt, fundamentally lacks the capacity to empathize with the 5,000 sailors currently enduring this grueling reality.
I see.
The author is essentially saying that empathy requires shared experience, or at the very least, a profound reverence for the sacrifice. Because Reinhardt believes the president lacks both, he views the casual dismissal of the Lincoln suffering not as a political gaffe, but as a predictable feature of his character.
Right.
It's an argument questioning the moral authority to wield the title of commander-in-chief.
So what does this all mean for the deployment itself? I mean, we have to look at the geopolitical why. Why is the USS Abraham Lincoln out there stretched to its absolute breaking point, taking permanent damage to its infrastructure?
Billion-dollar question.
Right. The author asserts that this deployment is tied to what he calls a war of choice with Iran. And he doesn't just rely on outside political commentators to back up that claim.
No, he doesn't.
He points to a very significant internal administration figure, Joe Kent.
And the inclusion of Joe Kent completely rewires the narrative of this deployment. Kent wasn't just some mid-level bureaucrat, right? He was Donald Trump's director of the National Counterterrorism Center.
Wow.
This is the official who sees the raw, unfiltered intelligence regarding global threats to the United States.
And Kent resigned. Reinhardt states that Kent explicitly cited his reason for leaving, saying that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. There was no attack on the homeland in the works. The United States' hand was not being forced.
Right.
So according to the administration's own top counterterrorism director, the aggressive posture requiring the Abraham Lincoln to remain on station for 260 days was an entirely voluntary political choice.
This raises an important question about the psychology of military service.
How so?
Well, the military operates on this unspoken social contract. Service members are trained to endure incredible hardship. They will endure the broken plumbing, the isolation, the physical danger if, and this is key, if they believe their suffering serves a vital national security objective.
Right, they need that purpose.
They are built for mission focus. But when the person reviewing the intelligence, the director of the NCTC, publicly resigns and frames the deployment as an unnecessary provocation, the psychological weight on the Sindlers shifts dramatically.
The hardship loses its strategic justification.
Exactly. And when suffering loses its meaning, morale collapses at an accelerated rate. That is the systemic danger Reinhardt is highlighting here. The crew isn't just exhausted, they are being told by internal experts that their exhaustion is essentially pointless.
It breaches the core agreement between the soldier and the state.
Right.
The idea of, I will sacrifice my comfort, my safety, maybe even my life, but you must only ask me to do it when the nation absolutely requires it.
That's the contract.
And Reinhardt is claiming that agreement has been blatantly violated. And he doesn't just leave the reader with that heavy realization. The piece ends with a highly prescriptive call to action. He wants accountability, and he wants it from the legislative branch.
Yeah, Reinhardt's conclusion totally bypasses the executive branch and urges readers to mobilize. He demands that the public call their senators to force immediate congressional hearings.
The specific demand is that the Secretary of the Navy, the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Secretary of Defense must be compelled to testify under oath.
Which is a huge demand.
It is. Reinhardt wants them to answer exactly how conditions on a premier U.S. aircraft carrier were allowed to become this catastrophic, why it took military families and congressional letters to expose it, and what concrete logistical steps are being taken to fix the ship today.
Right.
He is demanding a circumvention of Pentagon public relations in favor of sworn institutional accountability.
It's a massive push to reclaim oversight. When the military chain of command appears to fail its own personnel, the author looks to Congress to assert its constitutional authority over the armed forces.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up our analysis of this piece, there is a vital piece of factual information included in the source text that we really want to amplify here.
Yes, this is so important.
The author included a resource for anyone caught in the middle of these systemic pressures. If you or someone you know is a service member or a veteran struggling with thoughts of suicide or a mental health crisis, the Veterans Crisis Line is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call 988 and then press 1. You can text 838-255, or you can chat online at veteranscrisisline.net. That resource is confidential, and it is always available.
And amplifying that resource really grounds this entire geopolitical analysis back in reality. Because behind the debates over op tempo and executive rhetoric, there are human beings bearing the actual burden of these decisions.
Well said. And look, whether your daily life involves deep dives into military affairs, or you're simply trying to comprehend the forces shaping global news, this story demands your attention.
It really does.
It strips away all the abstract concepts of foreign policy and forces us to look at the granular human cost. It's fundamentally about the relationship between a nation, the leaders who issue the orders, and the people asked to execute the most dangerous jobs on the planet.
I want to leave you with a final thought to consider, something kind of hovering just outside the margins of Reinhardt's article.
Okay, let's hear it.
We are analyzing a situation where the trust between the chain of command and deployed troops is breaking down in this hyper-visible way. Military families are leveraging social media to bypass official channels, senators are drafting open letters based on leaks from the fleet, and high-level intelligence officials are resigning loudly.
It's unprecedented visibility.
It is. And if that institutional trust fractures so publicly in the digital age, what are the long-term consequences for the all-volunteer force?
That's a great point.
If the military operates like a high-performance engine and leadership proves willing to run it into the ground for a war of choice, how does a nation recruit the next generation necessary to respond to a real imminent threat tomorrow?
That's a chilling thought. You can only push the machinery so far past its red line before the damage becomes permanent. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.